Welcome back to Mentimeline. Thank you for finding your way to the channel. Today, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the mental timeline of Element 115 from Call of Duty Zombies. Element 115 is a zombie-creating stone called Divinium, sent to different universes by hellish beasts called apothecons, who exist within all of space-time. These Lovecraftian-inspired beings did so knowing that Divinium had the power to destroy space-time if mishandled, which is almost certain, as no mortals across existence had even the slightest knowledge of how to encounter it. They seek its destruction to again exist in an equal plane with the Keepers, who banished them to the Dark Ether post-war, as they remained in the uncorrupted ether. Despite being called Divinium, our earthly counterparts in Group 935 scientifically classified it as Element 115. That's what we'll refer to it as. Let's begin. Let's clear up two things. 1. Element 115 itself reanimates dead cells, creating zombies and undead creatures, but the element itself is not what kills those exposed to it. This may sound obvious while explained, but much of the community is led to believe that the element kills, then reanimates, when it is never stated that the element kills. Victims likely die due to a measurable mental change, which causes victims to stop eating, resting, and even stops characters from realizing what is happening to themselves. 2. Many characters in the story are found to be heavily exposed to the element based on Element 115 delusions. Somewhat of a spoiler, none of these are delusions. The sights seen, voices heard, and words stated by those affected are 100% real and are from different realities. Contact with the element connects victims to the ether. Pablo Miranez, who is Richthofen's Mexican test subject, sees the Great War where the main four, not in his universe, fight off the Apothecons. Jebediah Brown from the events of Buried see the Keepers, the entities who look to stop the Apothecons throughout all of creation, and so on and so forth. These victims are delusional, but are not experiencing delusions, only experiencing otherworldly beings and inexplicable circumstances. The only other thing left to clarify is the ether. This is what all victims are connected to after contact with the element and is a little hard to understand. The ether is the ground that physical existence walks on, and is the only thing that does not discriminate between timelines, dimensions, and universes, and has never changed. The ether is what is traveled through anytime someone in the game goes through a portal. No matter the dimension, distance, or dude, when you are between physical representations of reality, you are in the ether. The ether is indiscriminate existence and life is physical existence. The ether can exist with no life. It has no dependency on anything, but without the ether, life would be impossible. Simply put, victims have made contact with everything, every time, every way, while still being physically present wherever they are in existence. I don't state this to firmly define what the ether is, but to build how vast and incomprehensible the idea of contact with it is. Stage 1. Initial Exposure. We see that the element spawns grand curiosity within victims. It's almost like seeing an addict. However, unlike with drugs, the element's potential, potency, and power are limitless. We see that nobody is ever really content with Element 115, only seeking to get more and more from the element. We see this in characters such as Dimension 63 Maxis and Broken Steel founder Cornelius Purnell. Maxis becomes obsessed with the voice of Samantha, calling to him through the ether, and Purnell becomes obsessed with harnessing and understanding the ether and the power of 115. Both are forever changed because of their curiosity. Even if greed and purpose are different motives, endless possibilities means endless questions, which causes extreme negligence and lack of self-control. Victims may also start to experience memory loss or an altered sense of time. Upon Jebediah Brown's discovery of the element at Purgatory Point, his sense of time was thrown completely out of whack. He believed that he had been down in the 115 mine for a few hours, which really turned out to be 5 days. This can be extremely detrimental to physical health and speaks to how mentally consumed victims are. It's extremely hypnotic but is not hypnosis. The last thing that victims in the first stage may experience is hallucinations or signs of schizophrenia. As we spoke about earlier, the voices heard and entities seen after contact with 115 are as real as our characters. Some characters such as Richthofen, Purnell, and Schuster deal with the voices and sights well, and their progress does not cease. All continue to pursue personal, group, or country goals. Other characters such as Dimension 63 Maxis, Dr. Lehman, and Jebediah Brown are quickly controlled by the voices and visions, seeing them as all-powerful and all-knowing, not realizing that the entities are actively in need of them and or are manipulating them regardless of evil or good intent. Stage 2. Regular Exposure. Victims will start to experience a loss of humanity and identity, extreme disregard for oneself and others, and begin to stop making sane moral choices. Any characters that get through the initial exposure and have the mental capacity to still function ideally are losing core concepts of humanity, but have the mental aptitude to still seek the endless benefits of the element. When we first meet Dr. Lehman, we see he is hesitant, somewhat nervous, and reserved. A month after exposure to a copy of Richthofen's journal, which is said to have the same effects as contact with element 115, Dr. Lehman becomes extremely unreasonable, hostile, and increasingly aggressive, finding no hesitation to disrespect his superiors and disassociate from his morals, taking it upon himself to experiment on living test subjects and still clinging to the voice of Samantha after direct confrontation from Colonel Sawyer and Schuster regarding his different intentions with the element. He shows a clear lack of personality and a worsening sense of humanity, as the work and research being done is already inhumane. We find a similar case in Broken Steel founder Cornelius Purnell. First meeting Purnell, we see he has genuine care and concern for the lives of his men, experiencing grief and regret for unexplained deaths of comrades. Upon his regular exposure to the element, he began to hear voices he described as corrupted, but his greed regarding the upside of furthering his knowledge of the ether gave him tunnel vision. Purnell only wants to follow the voices that told him the positive consequences that will come. His care becomes so little for his men that he falsely imprisons Peter McCain after bringing him back to life with the elemental shard. His regard for his own safety and body diminish as he offers himself as a test subject in the APD. He loses his humanity and morals, killing Dr. Yuri during torturous interrogation purely for more information about the ether and Samantha. Purnell has completely lost himself and lives for a purpose that is only beneficial to him, killing and imprisoning others to get further, inviting possible self-harm to now only physically ascend as his mind is no longer present. These two are no longer people. These two no longer have identity. It's ironic that 115 makes dead organisms zombies that can be controlled by whoever controls the ether, but living subjects are basically mental zombies too, controlled by the products of the ether itself. Stage 3. Extensive exposure. We will start to see physical decay within victims, as well as the body and brain decaying simultaneously. We are also going to start seeing catatonic or turned subjects. This is the last stage that any shred of humanity is present, as death is the most human thing that can happen to people with extensive exposure. For the third stage, we look at two characters who ultimately end up dead at the hands of others who care for them. In the first case, we will be looking at Clive Farnsworth, who had extensive, uninterrupted exposure to element 115, and secondly, look at Dimension 63 Maxis, who was working with the element on and off for about a year. Clive Farnsworth is the first documented human to come into contact with element 115 at Purgatory Point. Clive is a human being with complete free will going down into the mine on day 1, and is a flesh-eating purposeless zombie when he comes back up after day 10. Starvation and malnutrition are likely what caused his death, as his mind became extremely overloaded and overstimulated as knowledge from the ether and other existences flooded in. 10 straight days around nothing but the same element that would drive Jebediah into madness. The result? A town member shooting Clive through the head after he mauled Jebediah's mother. Within these 10 days, stage 1 and 2 is something Clive experienced, losing himself and becoming a perfect example of what happens when a weak-minded or weak-willed person comes into contact with the element. The extensive exposure Dimension 63 Maxis experiences is over a larger period of time, but his journey ends with death all the same. The element at first is just as interesting as the research of the staff of the Ancients, but quickly becomes Maxis' only focus. He also became overly focused on the voice of Samantha, who in this universe is not his established daughter. Over the year, Maxis goes from acknowledging that he is overly focused on the two, the ether and Samantha, to admitting that his sanity is hanging by a thread. As more time passes, Richtofen notices how physically and mentally consumed Maxis is by his research, and fears the worst is coming. He is absolutely right. An iconic pan shows Maxis appearing to be under 100 pounds, easily strapped to a surgical table, where his wrists are the same width of his ears, I kid you not. Richtofen found Maxis in a catatonic state, no longer responsive or functioning. He ends Maxis' physical existence and extracts his brain to put it into a drone, likely to preserve it. Clive and Maxis were beyond saving from the initial stage. There was no way to throw their journeys into reverse. The last and final stage is stage 4, Unfettered Exposure. The only way to describe these victims are slaves to the ether. The first character that we're going to look at is Yuri Zavoyski, aka the Pentagon Thief. Dr. Yuri was part of the late Ascension group, joining alongside Dr. Gersh, the developer of the Gersh device. Yuri is ambitious and outgoing, and develops a sense of proving himself. The main focus of the Ascension group is teleportation and the Gersh device itself. Over time, Yuri shows incapabilities with the R&D of the Gersh device and almost destroys all the current work the group had been doing regarding it. In response, Yuri is essentially demoted. This sends Yuri into extreme anger and raging narcissism. At the same time, his superiors supply him with Richtofen's diary, which may as well be a micro-asteroid of element 115, as we spoke about with Dr. Lehman in America. Already developing dissociative mental tendencies, it isn't long at all until Yuri is hearing Samantha's voice and becoming intensely irate. It takes mere days for him to gain negative attention from his peers. As her will overtakes him, he kills lead scientist Anton Gersh and relishes in it for a few seconds, before realizing the monster he now is, and seeing the tracks of destruction lay with no hope to pick them up. Around November 1st, he hears the voices and makes his first connection with the ether, and by November 5th, Gersh is dead, his own technology being used by his killer to wreak havoc across space-time. Yuri is turned into the Pentagon thief and is effectively Samantha's zombie, now being sent a day through time to the Pentagon to do her bidding. After constantly doing Samantha's bidding and his mere ability to make it to the places he does, Purnell believes he may be of use and wants to siphon the information about Agartha, the ether, and Samantha from Yuri. Yuri has descended into complete and literal madness. During his interrogation, he actually tells no lies. He gives truth, warning, and self-regret. He is a being who doesn't comprehend there was a mind lost within himself. Yuri is effectively working with Samantha. If anyone has ascended in the way that Purnell seeks to, it's sitting right in front of him. And as we already spoke about, this is descent. Yuri puts into perspective that the ever-expanding ether, if capable of being understood, like Element 115, would only show how much more one needs to do to even scratch the surface. Yuri has the answers and experience Purnell wants in his brain, despite Purnell seeing the exact cost the answers and experiences took. A man so deeply consumed that he can only hysterically laugh at how fucked he, Purnell, and everyone across space-time is for seeking out the better left forgotten. The next character that we're going to take a look at is the Warden from Mob of the Dead and Blood of the Dead. The Warden was a supreme follower of the Shadow Man, the most powerful dark voice in the series other than maybe Samantha, granting the Shadow Man every service possible in life and in eternal death, referring to the Shadow Man as a lord. The Warden, while alive, completely cut ties with human concepts like morality, humanity, and empathy, openly admitting that he longs to see darkness spread in place of all creation. The Warden wants to find nothing but fulfillment and absolution in his death. In death, the Warden creates a pocket dimension for the Shadow Man, a loop replaying for the foreseeable future in Dimension 63, where the Warden is nothing but a pawn waiting for Richthofen. This isn't destiny nor fate. This is slavery. The Warden is a slave to the ether and a slave to the element. Taking away his physical representation, the Warden is figuratively nothing more than another apothecon. This stage is where those affected are products of Element 115 and the ether, and not tragedies of them. The last character that we're going to take a look at is Cornelius Purnell, aka the Avogadro. Purnell began to have the most unhealthy case of tunnel vision gone unhidden that we ever see in Call of Duty Zombies. A man using, abusing, and manipulating all those around him in order to understand and harness Element 115. The distaste that one must have for life in order to subject themselves to otherworldly experimentation is truly outstanding. A military-minded man from America becomes a literal Führer with Hitler-like qualities despite his hatred for the Reichstag, offering prison and death to those not opposed to him nor in his way, but to those who understand what he's going through and either voicing concern or directing him away from the dangerous path of progressive 115 use. Why is Yuri dead? For allowing Purnell to hear that the ether is nothing his mind or body is able to encompass? For telling him exactly what he seeks will destroy his very understanding of being? As Yuri actively lives a hell beyond burning. Purnell offers himself as the subject for APD testing so many times, it's clear that he'd rather be of the ether than of Earth. On his whopping 54th trial of the experiment, while inside the APD, the report McCain sent in leads to the timing of his arrest, prompting the defense agency to shut down testing mid-trial. The result? Purnell's mind and soul disappearing into the ether, and his physical life force becoming the Avogadro, pure electric energy harnessed into a human skeleton frame, a one-of-one entity that despite no longer being Cornelius, is just as destructive, killing everyone in the area and retreating back inside the APD where it was created, a true product of the ether, a slave to the element for eternity. That's going to be the end of the mental timeline of Element 115 from Call of Duty Zombies. You guys go ahead and leave feedback in the comments section. Also drop a like on the video. Let me know what you think. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.